Welcome to our soulful morning. Welcome to our beautiful time to connect with ourselves, to realize something more what we can do about our soul. So let's take some time in expressing our eternal gratitude for all the beautiful things that happen to us on a daily level. Life is a beautiful teacher. It teaches us so many things with experiences that we gather. We keep getting enriched and we keep expressing gratitude, looking for newer things to be grateful for. We are being taught how to become a better version of ourselves. Let's always be grateful for all that we've been given from time to time. Life in itself, however it's been, there are thousands of things to be grateful for. So let's express our gratitude with bowed necks, bowed towards the Almighty, guardians, the angels, the spirit guides, the loved ones, the ancestors, always present and known to us. They're always there. And whenever you think you're ready, you can start our book reading. Same Soul, Many Lives teaches us so much every day. And today, in that, we begin with chapter number 7, which is all about non-violence, wherein we're going to be reading stories, experiences, and progression, regression of Emma, Joyce, Roberta, and Anne. A 30-year-old woman named Emily, living in a previous life as part of a nomadic tribe in Central America, was killed in a mudslide in that earlier life, result of an earthquake in 1634. Her frantic husband tried desperately to save her, but his efforts were futile. For her, it was the end of a life of hardship. The tribe spent some of the time searching for water, and Emily, with a regress to the time before her death, remembered unending physical labor. The violence of nature was a given in her life. She spent her days in constant fear, not only for her own safety, but for the safety of the severity of the safety of the 70 others of her tribe. Now look at the regression. The year is there, 70 other people of tribe. Such a beautiful clarity, right? In this current life, Emily had a terror of being caught in an earthquake, trapped in an elevator, or imprisoned. The workshop, she told me that her husband, her daughter, who was her sister in the earlier life, those who had been members of the ancient tribe, those who are vital to us often appear in our past lives, and her present day sister had been members of the ancient tribe. And once again, she feared for them as for herself. The events of 9/11 traumatized her. No more severe earthquake could be imagined. She became very, very ill. Barely able to leave home. Another woman at the workshop named Joyce listened to her story, began to sob, and asked her why she was so moved. She had detailed vivid dreams of 9/11. She said only they occurred on the night of September 10th is coming to a workshop. She had been drawn to Emily. She had never met her. Without knowing why, she had followed her for 2 days without speaking to her. Now she knew why. And she also knew why she, like Emily, had been afraid to leave her house. She's a successful woman with wonderful worldwide public relations network. But since 9/11, she had not been able to go to her branch offices outside New York, and her business was suffering. The two women embraced finding solace in each other. In Emily's case, it was a violence of nature that had caused a trauma which persisted over many centuries. In Joyce's, the violence was a man made and might remain with her in future lives unless psychotherapy eased her fear. The story stayed with me, for I abhor violence. To me, it is one of the most terrible plagues of our planet. If violence is natural, a hurricane or, or an earthquake, we must accept it and understand it probably happens for a reason. But violence caused by our own hands and wills, whether forward other humans or against the planet itself, places individually and collectively in jeopardy. Anger management is a start towards preventing it. As we saw in chapter 2, without his aggressions, George might easily have worst effects that can be visited on the violent person's family, friends, and colleagues. I have dozens of similar cases of people who were violent or suffered violence in past lives, had to experience effect on themselves and on others in later lives, including this one. Roberta came to see me at the urging of her husband, Tom, a 38-year-old accountant who developed a successful practice working freelance for small businesses. I'd met him at a fundraiser for Mount Sinai Medical Center. Roberta, 6 years younger, who was also successful, a vice president in a public relations department for a major airline. She came in early one bright winter morning, Tom at her side. Her blonde curly hair sparkling in the office light surrounded an oval face and gave her a little orphan Annie look. The impression of youth offset by piercing wise blue eyes and a wide sensuous mouth, delicately lipsticked in light, lipsticked in light red. She was slim and her hand was soft when it shook mine. Tom had told me that they were having trouble conceiving, and I presume the psychological ramifications of that were what had brought them to me. I was wrong. Tom is going to leave me, she blurted as soon as she had left that room, and I finished taking down the details of age, address, profession, and family. But when we met at the fundraiser, Tom said that Roberta was his reason for being. Hardly the remark of a man about to ditch his wife. What makes you think so? I asked. Has he said something, intimated in any other way that he's, oh no, nothing like that. She paused, gnawed at a nail, and looked at me shyly. I just know it. There's no objective event, it's an internal feeling. She shrugged. You'd probably call it a fantasy, but it's so real. It haunts me. I can't sleep. It's all I think about. When you talk to Tom about it, he tells me I'm being silly. I stopped being Tom because he'd think I was being silly or even paranoid. And that would prompt him to leave me quicker. This kind of circular thinking is common in patients who have lost time grounding with reality. Then how do you act towards him? Her eyes look towards the floor. Mostly I cling to him even though I don't think he likes it. That makes me mad. So I push him away. He and I both hate it that I'm so dependent. He says I should trust him, have confidence in him, in us. I know I should, but I can't. What does Tom see when you tell him that you can't? Nothing. The silence is the worst. I could see her tremble through her voice, remain strong. Obviously, she was feeling deep emotion. He's a good man. When I'm happy, he's happy, but when I'm sad, he gets sad too. And when you're angry and push him away, I think he gets angry too, but he doesn't like to show it. Mostly he tries to get me out of my moods, jolly me out of them like I'm getting some kind of invalid emotional cripple. He tells me you're having trouble conceiving. The expression grew sad. Yes, you've seen a doctor, of course. He could find nothing wrong with either of us. What about in vitro fertilization? That was a safe topic. Her voice grew steadier. It is an option, but we don't want to do it unless the doctor feels it's our only choice. I'm sensitive to hormones of all kinds. Put me next to a bee and I'm in terror of anaphylactic shock. What about adoption? Again, an option, a last resort. I want his child. And he wants yours absolutely. Your sex life is healthy, robust. She blushed. Good. You were silent for a while. I must have been smiling because those penetrating eyes caught me when she was suddenly angry. What's so funny? You're both trying to have a baby. Your sex life is robust. He's given me hint that he wants to leave you. I know for a fact that Tom says you're the reason for being. Why not take him at the word? Because of fear. Fear of what? Fear of being abandoned. She began to cry. I can't think of anything worse. Here was a classic argument for regression therapy. There was nothing in Roberta's life that pointed to abandonment by someone she loved, but her terror was so great that it seemed clear that she had been abandoned at some previous time. She loved Tom dearly and he knew it. Her behavior and fears made no sense in the context of what I knew about the relationship. Maybe I told her. We could find the source of her fears in another time, another life. Oh, she said. If we could, how marvelous. She was soon under, and it did not take long for us to find a link. It's 8:49, she said with enormous sorrow. The year I died. I live in a nice house, one of the best in the village. I have a husband I love very much. He's my life. I'm 4 months pregnant for the first child. It's a difficult pregnancy. I'm often sick and it's hard for me to work. I'm comfortable when I'm trying lying down. A look of anguish crossed her face, and she raised her hands protectively over her eyes. We are in imminent danger of attack. There's an invading army at our gates. At our gates. All the town people, men and women, are armed against them, prepared to fight for the town. Tears came. I'm too weak to fight. My husband says I'm to stay home and that if he sees the battle is going badly, he'll come back for me and take me south to the village of his ancestors. I beg him to take me now, but he says he must fight. It's his duty. How do you feel about that? I asked. Sad, very sad. Who'll look after me? Her anguish was evident. Do you want to stop the regression? No, to go out. No, to go on. Deeply hypnotized, she began to breathe heavily, and her body tensed in a chair. He's gone, she told me. I can hear the shouts and screams of the battle. I pace the floor, waiting. I'm frightened, worried about my unborn baby. The door bursts open. Thank God, I say. Only it isn't my husband, it's the invaders. They rape me. An invader slashes at me with a sword, slashes again. The sword strikes my womb. The baby dies. I fall. There's blood everywhere. Another slash. This at my throat. She gave a strangled cry. I am dead. When I brought her back, she looked at me with horror. My husband, he was Tom, my love. He left me there to die. It was as though sunshine had left the room. As we've seen in other cases, present life relatives of the patients appear in past lives, but the relationship to the patient is often changed. A daughter can become a grandmother, a father, a sister, a brother, a child. We learn from our relationships. People come back together again and again to resolve issues and to learn about love in all forms. Sometimes, as in Roberta's case, the relationships are the same. Her husband Tom, in his life, was her husband in the 9th century as well, and he abandoned her, or did he? I wondered if it would be possible to regress Tom into the same time and place to find out what had happened to him that day. Why had he abandoned her? What was his life like after the death of his wife and unborn child? In the present, he had accompanied Roberta to several of her sessions, waiting in the outer office for her to finish, and occasionally the three of them would talk when Roberta's time was over. Now I called him and got their permission to regress Tom, though it was though it was acknowledged that he would not become my patient. I'd worked with couples who had started earlier lives, and now I was particularly anxious to get Tom's version of things if I could. If Roberta knew he hadn't abandoned her, then perhaps her fear of his abandoning her would diminish. Dom had a commitment out of town, so an appointment was made for several weeks later. Roberta returned the following week for her next visit. She regressed effortlessly. It's Paris, summertime. I'm young, no more than 25, and very pretty. All I want to do is have fun, but I can't. My grandmother lives with me. I recognize her. She's Tom. This was said without surprise, although what she saw was detailed and vivid. Roberta was not nearly as agitated by the regression as she was by the previous one. My grandmother brought me up since both my parents died when I was a little girl. But now I have to take care of her because she's sick and frail. She's demanding to do this, do that. We have no money. So I have to shop, clean, cook, and change my stinky grandmother's clothes because she's always soiling herself. Finally, she spoke with some vehemence. It isn't fair. I shouldn't have to do this day after day. Girls got to have some pleasure in her life. She leaned towards me conspirately. I'm running away. I'm running to my friend Alan's house. He'll take care of me and he'll show me a good time. She skipped forward in time, and it's unclear whether her next memories immediately followed this absence from her grandmother's apartment or later one. My grandmother's dead. Well, I was drinking, to cabarets, dancing, making love. She just died. I found her body when I came home. It looks like she starved to death because she was really skinny. None of her neighbors heard the cry out, so it's hard to tell whether she died, but it couldn't have been too long ago. She doesn't smell yet, least not any more than she always has. It's bad news, though, leaves me in an awful pickle. I'm about to have a baby and I've got no money, not a cent on me. I'm not even sure who the father is. Alan says that he'd give money if the baby is his, but I had to prove it. Now, how am I going to do that until after the baby is born? It didn't matter in the end. Roberta saw herself die in childbirth and soul floated out of the body. She watched long enough to make sure the baby lived, no matter who the father was. In her life review, the overwhelming emotion was guilt. I loved my grandmother, not just because she raised me, but because she was a good woman who wanted only the best for me. But I was too young, too selfish. I put my very own needs for freedom and love ahead of her, far greater ones. At the very least, I could have balanced them, but I ended up abandoning her and she abruptly stopped. You see the connection? I said, not prompting her, but knowing she had indeed related the two regressions. Of course, I abandoned her because my husband abandoned me like 1,000 years earlier. In Paris, she was Tom, my husband, who left me to die alone. It was an act of revenge. A third regression, which took place a week later, showed us a different facet of the same theme of nonviolence and abandonment. This time, she was a Pakistani girl living in a small wooden house from 500 years ago. Her mother had died when she was 11. And as in Paris, the burden of cooking, cleaning, and often tedious chores fell on her. Though in this life she had a father and brother who might have helped her. They beat me, she said. Whatever I did, whenever I did something wrong, if I didn't wash their clothes in time, if I didn't like the food I served, they'd scream at me and hit me, one or the other of them, and sometimes both of them at once. Why don't you leave them? Run away. I needed them for food and shelter. Worse, I was afraid of what my life would be if I went away. Anything else, I loved them. Her answer surprised me. Really, why? Because they couldn't help but help what they did. After all, her mother abandoned them by dying. Two of her other siblings died before she did. It was a bleak time, a dark time. There was no law. There was the ones who had to bring home food, which meant that every day there was a possibility of violence. John said, killed. Illness had struck out mother could have felt on any of us. They had no over control over the world What would happen? To control over nature, over other men, over fate. She shook her head. To be a man in that time, to have no money and no hope, that was awful. So it was because of them, not in spite of them, that he chose to stay, I said. It was an explanation she had thought of, but I was sure she would have come to it herself. What happened next? They stopped beating me. One day they just plain stopped. My father died soon after, but my brother stayed and took me to the household when he married. Eventually, I found a man who loved me. We moved away. He was a good man. We led a normal life, but for that time and place. You died happy? I died content. In her present day review, she realizes all three regressions, and particularly the first explained why she was so afraid that Tom would leave her in this life, but she knew it was her brain, not her heart, that she remained uneasy. I'm seeing Tom tomorrow, maybe he can help. He arrived apprehensively. I'm doing this for Roberta to find out about her, not about me. To prevent distortion, I had instructed Roberta not to tell Dom any details of own past life recollections. I promised him that he would have to undergo only one session unless he chose to come back. Not a chance, he said with the wariness of the mystical that was common to accountants, lawyers, and doctors, whose analytical minds begged for precise explanation. I was mildly surprised, therefore, when he reached a deeply relaxed level within a few minutes. I'm going to lead you to a past life when you and Roberta were together. I told him, remembering Elizabeth and Pedro from our book Only Love is Real, who also remembered sharing past lives. Through them, I had discovered the fact of all soulmates coming together multiple times, and I had seen the same phenomena in other patients. Almost immediately, his back arched as though something or someone had hit him. I've got to get out of here, he said desperately. Where are you? In a battle, we surrounded, outflanked. My poor wife, I've left her alone. I promised. His eyes were closed, but he raised his arms as though wielding an axe or a sword. I'll cut my way out. She needs me. With the cry, he brought his arms down. Then the muscle tension vanished, and his hands lay limply in his lap. Too late, he whispered. I'll never see my wife again, never know my child. His last feelings were of guilt and sadness, which have brought him back to present. He told me he would never leave Roberta again. When Roberta came for her next session, she was relaxed and smiling. The sunshine had returned. Obviously, she and Tom had spent some time expressing the experience of the ninth century. I now know why he didn't come back to rescue me. He abandoned me, true, but not because he wanted to, not because I wasn't in his dying thoughts. Well, he's too old now to fight for his country. So I guess I'm safe in this life. With your help, Dr. Weiss, it's clear why I was so afraid he'd leave me. It's clear that when he says he loves me, he means that people in love don't go in so much of abandonment, do they? Roberta was able to let go of her fear of abandonment, her insecurities, her doubts about Tom. She realized that violence was not necessarily a part of every life, and that she was free to choose love instead of fear. This choice was a core theme or pattern in many of the subsequent regressions, and she saw it in the young Pakistani girl who elected to love her father and brother despite their violent natures rather than hate or fear them. There was one remaining obstacle for Roberta and Tom: their infertility. The loss of their child in the ninth century might explain it. So she might, so she might her death during childbirth in 19th century France. But these events had already taken place, she understood, and the issue of abandonment might very well not happen again in this life or future ones. I decided to try to progress Roberta into the near future so she could fully understand this concept. As always, she quickly reached a peaceful state and soon observing the course of her life from a higher perspective. I see two people, two possible life paths, one with children and the other without. Start with without. The one without is dark, narrow, barren. I'm afraid of everything, from insects and snakes to going out of doors. Because we can't have children. Tom has abandoned me, and that adds to my fear. No other man will choose me, and I am too weak and fearful to exist on my own. She shuddered. It's awful. But with children, I prompted. The world is sunny and wide. Tom is with me, just as he promised. I am fulfilled. Progressed to this happy life, she was able to completely let go of fears, which she'd carried over for many lifetimes, the loss of loved ones and her own death, abandonment, and betrayal. As she was making these corrections, face took on a radiance. Where are you? I'm up very high, high up in the clouds. I'm floating, floating and watching. It's beautiful here. The air is clear. I can see for miles. Are you alone? Yes, wait, no. Two girls, ancient children, my children are coming to greet me. I can feel their love, feel their joy. Oh, I love them. And I am joyful watching a future soul. I recognize them. One is my grandmother, the woman I love most in the world. She died when I was 9. The other is my mother. Not my mother today, but my mother of the Pakistani girl I was in a past life 500 years ago. They're hugging me and I'm hugging them. And I will be with them always. I have no way of validating Roberta's vision, but I report it accurately. It is her experience. She really believed that this would come to pass. It is possible that Roberta and Tom will not be able to conceive, and the notion of any children, all that is fantasy. Roberta and Tom could, of course, adopt children. What is important is that Roberta has full confidence that eventually she will be united with her children. And because of this state, she's so confident of herself and her ability to love. She has made her way from a time of violence to a time of peace. She has made progress towards the point above the clouds. Roberta's story demonstrates the harm that violence causes, not just immediately, but for future generations. And not just for the victim, but for a perpetrator. Those who are violent or who suffer violence may carry their fears, their attendant negative emotions ahead to many, many future lives until they, like Roberta, find love. Anne's story presents a fascinating contrast to Roberta's. For hers, started in the future. 2 days before she came to see me, she awoke from a dream drenched into sweat. It was another of those weird, recurrent dreams she had been having. She woke up sweating only if the dream had deep, as if the dream had meaning. The Anne who became the future and was determined by choices. She heard a voice saying, though she could not see the messenger and did not know it was male or female, someone very wise was giving her the message and told me it seemed to me already that her choices would be, but she had no idea what choices it was talking about. All her life, she'd acted impulsively and often abruptly, arbitrarily. And 24, stocky but not fat, looking like the bespectacled girl who plays the star's best friend in teenage movies, was a graduate student studying architecture up north. Her goal was to design innovative housing complexes, incorporating environmental concerns and allowing the rich and poor to live together. Her was a vision of people living in harmony in a beautiful setting. The voice knew of her plan. In a dream she had when she started working together. It showed her a future where Anne had already designing the projects. It was like a novelist wanting to write a novel and finding out from a messenger that he had already written it in the future. Your job is to connect to that future where you developed your plan, not the one where you have not, the voice told her. She did not know that I had started progressing patient in the future. She was curious about the meaning of the dream in the present. She told me an impediment to fulfilling her plan lay in a fear of the limelight. If someone praised her work, she should get anxious. Usually, she would submit her drawings anonymously, even though her professors knew she was the artist. The prospect of winning an award or achieving general recognition filled her with dread. Public issue, success, she knew would precipitate a panic attack. Her history indicated no explanation for those reactions in her current life. I was intrigued by her dreams, though Jessica took into her future first or for more clarification. She agreed. While she was in a relaxed trance state, I let her ahead in time to discover what would happen to the housing project. She watched several future scenarios unfold. In one, there was no project at all. She worked at an architectural firm, but at a mid level position, drafting the idea for others. In a second, housing project was complete and incorporated in some of her ideas. It was imperfect, not what she had envisioned. She could see the plaque in the main lobby. Her name was not listed. Third scenario, triumph. The complex were entirely her design. Her name was on the architectural drawings and the plaque, yet when she reported it, she did not feel happy. There were several other possible scenarios as well, but not as distinct as these three. It's a fear. She said when I brought her back, the fear of recognition, the fear of success. I recognize I can go any of the ways, but the third seems the most terrifying. I don't want my name on that plaque. In fact, plaque was not a sign of ego. It was a symbol representing the absence of fears and of a panic attacks. Her name would not go on as long as she was afraid. I knew we would have to look into a past for healing to take place. In her first suggestion, Anne was a boy in an ancient horse riding culture of Central Asia. The chief of her nomadic village had a son who was 2 years older than Anne but did not possess Anne's skill at horseback riding, at archery, or with the saber. He doesn't like me. The other boy was being groomed to his father's successor. It infuriated the old man to see his son continually bested. Anne was oblivious to the effect of success. Yet more and more, the chieftain's son was humiliated by Anne's victories. There was a riding contest for all the young men in the village. Anne said it was one I determined to win, and I did. Entire town, men and women, feted me for my achievement. I drank too much and lay down in a field outside the village to sleep. The chieftain's son stuck up silently and slit my throat. I did not die quickly. I watched my wine red blood flow out. In a discussion after I led her back, Anne told me she had not begun to apprehend the mortal danger success created. Of course, she exclaimed. Sitting here with you now is easy to link outward success with great physical harm. No wonder I'm afraid. She could see the patterns of success creating danger in a kaleidoscopic string of images of past life towards the next regression. In one, she was a talented musician, a man ruined by his rival who stole Anne's music and presented it as his own. Another, she was a girl in a Near Eastern kingdom. Some 2000 years ago, upper class boys of her age were taught arcane secrets and rituals forbidden to girls, but Anne spied in the restricted classes and learned what they did. One day, being taunted by the boys, she blurted out one of the secrets. You see, she said, I know just as much as you all do. She paid for her arrogance with her life. She was reported, jailed, and soon killed because death was a punishment for breaking the taboo. As you proceed these experiences, Anne was able to pinpoint the equation. Success meant violence, self exposure meant punishment, pride meant death. Gradually, with more therapy, she was able to realize that her panic at being in the limelight was the consequences of past life experiences, not something she had to fear in her present or future lives. With difficulty, for her terror went deep, she was able to relinquish her fears. She began to sign her class drawings and she built a scale model of a building complex, winning a prize for most innovative design. She would not go so far as to give an acceptance speech, she admitted, but the prize, a silver plaque, stands on her mantle. We both have an idea of the futures, but Anne will find herself in. Instead, the Anne who will become the future Anne will be determined by her choices. She no longer sweats when the master comes to remind her. How wonderful. Okay, I have an announcement to make. For 4 5 days, I would be concluding the class the minute our chapter ends, because I have to go for physiotherapy, which is at sharp 7. The doctor has given me sharp 7. He has a client at 6:30 already. So it's not very far, but I would be taking some time to go for that. I had an injury 4 weeks ago, which is troubling me far too much. So regularly for 3 4 days I have to go. So, and I've seen the book. We have 4 5 more days to complete the book. Every day we'll be reading one chapter. And when the chapter concludes, I shall also be exiting the class because of my travel time for my physio. So thank you so much. Be blessed. I would request, because you are used to being there here for 1 hour, today it's only been half an hour plus. Please meditate rather than just going back to bed or doing something else. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And Pratima ji, a very belated happy birthday. Yesterday was your birthday. I didn't got know, I got to know from another group. So lots of love to you. And you look pretty as always, radiating your lovely blessings.
Thank you so much, Prachi. It's always been wonderful to be with you and have your love, affection, and care. I really appreciate it so much. You mean too much to me. I don't know. Some past life regression
Thank
I have to do.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad that we had this beautiful connect. I'm sure we met
Absolutely.
before, and it's not
Thank
from
you.
this life itself. So thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
I
And
hope
keep
you had a
well,
really blessed
get
day.
well fast. We always look forward to you being with us. So get well fast and come back.
Thank you so much. No, it was just I tore the soft tissue of both my knees. So doctor said
Oh my
it's
God.
8 weeks. It's already been 4 weeks and it's troubling me so much. So he said, you've got to come for this therapy.
Yeah, yeah. Take care of your health. We'll
Thank you.
wait for you.
Thank you so much. I'll see you
Lovely.
tomorrow, everybody. See you tomorrow
Yeah.
at 6. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.